Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and you're watching a special broadcast here on DD India. It's good to have you again with us. Now, India, as you may know, has been elected as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for the years 2021 and 2022. So going forward, every month we'll get you a roundup of UN Security Council's activities, a flavor of what happens around the famed horseshoe table in the Security Council chamber, and the stand taken by India during debates or discussions on global crises. So what you're watching now is the January 2021 edition of our special show called India in UN. Before I proceed any further, I want to give you, the viewer, a historical perspective of India's engagement with the UN over the decades. Take a look. Now, India has had a long association with the United Nations. India was among the original members of the UN that signed the declaration by UN at Washington, D.C. on 1st January 1942. India also took part in the UN Conference on International Organization held at San Francisco from 25th April to 26th June 1945. What you should also know about India is India's path to the UNSC. Now, it's the 8th time that India has been elected to the UN Security Council. India was first elected to the UNSC in 1950-51. It was also elected in 1967-68, 1972-73, 1977-78, 1984-85, 1991-92 and most recently 2011 and 2012. Now in 2020, India and 4 other countries, Mexico, Ireland, Norway and Kenya, were elected for a 2-year term. Now the other 5 non-permanent members currently in the UNSC are Estonia, Niger, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Tunisia and Vietnam. Now, let me take you on a trip down memory lane. Here's a look at India's stints in the UNSC over the decades.
During India's first tenure in the UN Security Council between 1950-51, as President of the UN Security Council, India presided over the adoption of the resolutions calling for cessation of hostilities during the Korean War. During India's second tenure in the UN Security Council, between 1967-68, India drafted its first resolution extending the mandate of the UN in Cyprus. During our third tenure in the Security Council between 1972-73, India pushed strongly for admission of Bangladesh into the United Nations. During the fourth tenure of India in the Security Council between 1977-78, the then External Affairs Minister, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, spoke in the Security Council for Namibia's independence. During our fifth tenure in the Security Council between 1984-85, India witnessed the tragic assassination of Prime Minister Mrs. Indira Gandhi. India's Prime Minister, Shri P.V. Narasimha Rao, participated in the first ever UN Security Council summit during our sixth tenure in the Security Council between 1991-92. During our seventh tenure in the UN Security Council between 2011 and 12, India was a strong voice for the developing world, peacekeeping, counterterrorism, and Africa.
All right, I want to take a moment or two to talk about the Security Council itself. Now, under the UN Charter, the Security Council has primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. It has 15 members, 5 permanent members, the US, the UK, France, Russia and China, and 10 non-permanent members which are elected for 2-year terms by the General Assembly. Now, each member has one vote, and under the Charter, all member states are obligated to comply with Council decisions. And a representative of every UNSC member must be present at all times at the UN headquarters so that Security Council can meet at any time as the need arises. By the way, did you know the Security Council chamber was furnished by Norway and designed by leading Norwegian architect Arnstein Renning Arneberg? It's easily identified by its central horseshoe-shaped table, a large mural by Norwegian artist Per Lasson Krogh. It symbolizes the promise of future peace and individual freedom. All right, moving on, India pursues what it calls the 5S approach. What's the 5S approach all about? Well, it stands for Samman, which is Hindi for respect, Samvad, dialogue, Sahyog, cooperation, Shanti, peace, and Samriddhi, meaning prosperity. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called for reformed multilateralism as part of a policy known as New Orientation for a reformed multilateral system or norms. India says reformed multilateralism is a must for the post-COVID-19 era. India says a first and vital step is the reform of the Security Council. It must reflect contemporary realities to become that much more effective. Remember, India is a member of the Group of Four, a group of countries that seeks a permanent seat on the Security Council and advocates reform of the UNSC. The G4 comprises India, Japan, Germany, and Brazil. All right, now that you have a better understanding of India in UNSC, here's a short video that talks about what India stands for in the words of Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself. Take a listen.
हमारा मार्ग जन कल्याण से जग कल्याण का है। भारत की आवाज हमेशा शांति, सुरक्षा और समृद्धि के लिए उठेगी।
The real challenges facing the world are those that are truly indivisible and transcend national boundaries. They include terrorism, pandemics, and climate change. India will keep the international spotlight firmly focused on the task of combating them.
India's 75-year engagement with the United Nations is based on its steadfast commitment to multilateralism and addressing the challenges faced by the global community in the interest of preserving international peace and security.
We will be representing the voice of 1/6 of humanity. And as Prime Minister Modi mentioned, we will use the prestige and experience of being the largest democracy in the world for the benefit of mankind.
दुनिया के अनेक देशों ने भारत पर जो विश्वास जताया है, मैं उसके लिए सभी साथी देशों का आभार प्रकट करता हूं।
All right, time for a short break, but before that, here's a quiz question for you. When is International Day of Yoga celebrated? I'll give you a hint. It will come up later in the year. The right answer when we come back. Keep watching DD India. Don't go anywhere.
As the day unfolds and news and events take shape, we get you complete coverage of every news breaking in, tracking new developments as they happen. Midday Prime English, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching a special broadcast here on DD India. We're calling it India in UNSC, the January 2021 edition. Now, before we went into the break, I'd asked you, when is International Day of Yoga celebrated? The correct answer is 21st June. I repeat, 21st June. Congratulations if you got it right. Better luck next time if you did not know the answer. But there are more questions coming your way on this show, so stay tuned. All right, now the permanent mission of India to the UN at New York plays a crucial role in India's engagements with the UNSC. It's housed in a 27-story red granite building. The main tower is in shimmering redwood-colored metal panels and blue windows. It was built in the year 1993. Now, designed by Indian architect Charles Correa, the building is located just off South Avenue between 43rd and 44th Street. The red granite cladding of the building and the huge Rajasthani timber doors that grace the entrance to the mission set the building apart from the surrounding glass and brushed stainless steel. But what's a building without people, right? So I want you to take a look at Team India in New York. It's headed by Ambassador T.S. Tirumurthy, who is ably assisted by two Deputy Permanent Representatives, K. Nagaraj Naidu and R. Ravindra, besides other officials.
I'm happy to say that our team in the Permanent Mission of India in New York is all geared up for the Security Council. And I'm confident that our team will do India proud.
We are all excited, we are well prepared. Our teams are in place both in New Delhi as well as in New York. We look forward to a very productive and substantive 2-year term on the Council.
While we are in the Council, we will be a forceful voice and will work constructively with other Council members in finding meaningful solutions to the problems faced by Africa and West Asia.
Now, as is the custom, the Indian flag was installed along with that of the other incoming members outside the UNSC chamber on 4th January. Now, just so you know, the tradition was started by Kazakhstan in 2018. Right, let me now give you an overview of the countries or regions of the world that came up for discussion in the month of January in the UNSC. They included Syria, West Africa and the Sahel, Mali, Yemen, Central African Republic, Cyprus, Colombia, Belarus, Israel and Palestine, COVID-19 pandemic, peace building, energy, the League of Arab States and reform of the UN Security Council as sought by the Group of Four comprising India, Germany, Brazil and Japan. All right, so as I mentioned before, the UNSC held a briefing on chemical weapons in Syria on 5th January. It was conducted by UN Under-Secretary General and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs Izumi Nakamitsu. India made the following points in the meeting. India said, and I quote, India attaches high importance to the Chemical Weapons Convention, which is a unique, non-discriminatory disarmament instrument and serves as a model for the elimination of an entire category of weapons of mass destruction. India has been firmly opposed to any use of chemical weapons anywhere, at any time, by anybody and under any circumstances. We strongly condemn the use of chemical weapons and there can be no justification for their use. With regard to allegations of use of chemical weapons in Syria and investigations conducted in this regard, India has consistently underlined the need for an impartial and objective investigation into any alleged use of chemical weapons, scrupulously following the provisions and procedures laid down in the Convention. Any concerns should be addressed on the basis of consultation among all concerned parties and, in our view, politicization of the issue is neither helpful nor productive, unquote. Also, India has given $1 million to the trust fund of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, or OPCW, for activities relating to destruction of chemical stockpiles and related facilities in Syria. Now, talking about the Syrian conflict in general, India said, I quote, India has consistently called for a comprehensive and peaceful resolution of the Syrian conflict through a Syrian-led dialogue, taking into account the legitimate aspirations of the people of Syria. We've also contributed to the return of normalcy and rebuilding of Syria through humanitarian assistance and human resource development, unquote. Now, while on the subject of Syria, there was another meeting on the political and humanitarian situation in Syria held on 20th January. In that meeting, Ambassador Tirumurthy said it was imperative that all parties adhere to their international obligations to fight terrorism in Syria.
The fact that conflict has been so long drawn and intractable points to the inevitability of a Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political process, preserving the unity, sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Syria in line with the UN Security Council Resolution 2254, culminating in constitutional reform and free and fair elections. We hope that the conflict in Syria will end and the reconstruction of Syria will begin. Towards this objective, India is ready to play a constructive and meaningful role in the Council.
Now, a quick update on India-Syria relations. Now, since 2011, India has provided Syria with $12 million in humanitarian assistance, soft loans worth $265 million, developed a biotech park and an IT center, supplied 10 metric tons of COVID-19 medicines, organized an artificial limb fitment camp in Damascus, and given 1,000 scholarships to Syrian students. India also spoke about how sanctions affect the lives of ordinary Syrians. Take a listen.
We should be sensitive to the debilitating impact that sanctions continue to have on the lives of the common people of Syria. India supports the UN continuing its humanitarian relief operations through all possible channels with the cooperation of the Syrian government. We believe that the cause of humanitarian assistance should always be bereft of politics and politicization.
Right, time for another short break, but before that, here's a quiz question for you. A former Indian foreign minister spoke strongly in the Security Council in 1978 for Africa and specifically for Namibia's independence. Who was he? I'll give you a hint. He went on to become the Prime Minister of India. Keep watching DD India. Don't go anywhere.
Your window to rising India. India's voice on global platforms. Latest news from India and around the world. In-depth analysis of global headlines. Watch DD India in your country. Available for downlink in all Southeast Asian countries. STTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT-17 at 93.5 degrees east. HDTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT-10 at 83 degrees east. For technical details, scan here. Switch to DD India now.
Welcome back. You're watching a special broadcast here on DD India. We're calling it India in UNSC January 2021 edition. Now, before we went into the break, I'd asked you, a former Indian foreign minister spoke strongly in the Security Council in 1978 for Africa and specifically for Namibia's independence. Who was he? The right answer is Atal Bihari Vajpayee. He served as India's foreign minister from 1977 to 1979. He is a former Prime Minister of India as well. And he was the first Indian foreign minister to deliver a speech in Hindi at the UN General Assembly. He passed away in 2018. So congratulations if you got it right. Better luck next time if you did not know the answer. There are more questions coming your way on this show, so stay tuned. Right, moving on for now. Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla of India took part in the UN Security Council's open debate on challenges of maintaining peace and security in fragile contexts. He made 8 important points. 1. The legacy of colonialism constitutes the foundational basis of the current instabilities that plague the African continent. 2. One should not paint all fragility issues with the same brush. 3. Full respect for national ownership can never be overemphasized. We should recognize the primacy of national governments and national ownership in identifying and driving priorities, strategies, and activities for sustaining peace. 4. The UNSC should remain respectful of the regional approach adopted by countries in collaboration with regional organizations to address common challenges. The African Union has a leadership role to play in consolidating peace and post-conflict reconstruction in Africa. 5. We need to ensure that the UN and its presence on the ground, its peacekeeping operations and special political missions are sufficiently mandated and resourced to implement a comprehensive understanding of peace and security. Peacekeeping missions should have a clear and well thought out exit strategy. 6. It's important to actively support the post-conflict reconstruction agenda of Africa. In this regard, the UN Peace-Building Commission's efforts should be strengthened. 7. The role of technology, especially digital technology, to improve public services, promote transparency in governance, and enhance the reach of democracy, human rights, and gender sensitivity has not yet been sufficiently appreciated and factored in. COVID has brought us unparalleled grief, but also helped us to do things differently. We need to factor in technology with a human face in this mix. And 8. Africa today is facing serious challenges posed by the growth of terrorism, particularly in the Sahel and Horn of Africa. Initiatives taken in this regard need more robust support from the UNSC and the international community." Unquote.
While democracy is undoubtedly gaining ground in Africa, especially through peaceful transfers of power, African countries, particularly in the Sahel, Central Africa, and the Horn of Africa, continue to face complex challenges. The principal driving factors are chronic political instability, weak governance structures, institutional weaknesses, ethnic divisions, and the presence of terrorists and armed groups. Overexploitation of diminishing resources, mainly in the Lake Chad Basin and Great Lakes region, are also exacerbating the problem. The Libyan conflict and resulting instability continue to have a negative impact on its neighbors. The COVID-19 pandemic has only made the situation worse in some countries.
The Foreign Secretary Shringla made another important observation. He said, and I quote him here, "The Council needs to introspect that while more than half of this country issues on the Council's agenda pertain to Africa, the African continent does not even have a single voice amongst the permanent membership to defend its own interests. We need to correct this historical anomaly." Unquote. Now that's a point to ponder. A quick word here about India-Africa relations. The bonds between India and Africa have been forged over several centuries. Long-standing trade and diaspora links across the Indian Ocean, a shared colonial past, and common developmental challenges have shaped India-Africa relations. Now, India worked together with African partners to eliminate the evils of colonialism and apartheid. Also, India and Africa work together for a fairer global governance system, including a more equitable global economic order. Take a look at the development partnership between India and Africa now. There are 50 countries on the African continent. India has reached out to 43 of them. India has executed 189 developmental projects in 37 African countries. 77 projects worth nearly $13 billion are in various stages of execution. At the third India-Africa Forum Summit held in 2015, India announced $10 billion in lines of credit and $600 million in grant assistance to African countries. India has committed soft loans for solar projects in Africa, offered 50,000 scholarships to African students. It trains armed forces of African countries in counter-insurgency and counter-terrorism. Indian hospitals have been linked to 16 African countries to offer tele-education and telemedicine services. India supplied medicines to several countries in Africa to help them fight the COVID-19 pandemic. India was the first developing country to provide duty-free, quota-free market access to 33 countries in Africa. India is Africa's third largest export destination. Indian companies have invested over $54 billion in Africa. They've created hundreds of thousands of jobs as well. And India also extends debt relief to African countries under a G20 initiative. And all this, mind you, as Foreign Secretary Shringla said, is in keeping with the 10 guiding principles of India's engagement with Africa as articulated by Prime Minister Modi in his address to the Parliament of Uganda in July 2018. Now, by the way, did you know the Security Council held its first session on 17th January 1946 at Church House in Westminster, London. Since its first meeting, the Security Council has taken permanent residence at the UN headquarters in New York City. By the way, it also traveled to many cities, holding sessions at Addis Ababa in Ethiopia in 1972, Panama City in Panama, and Geneva in Switzerland in 1990. Right, let's move on. On 12th January, Indian Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar spoke at the Unsc Open Debate on threats to international peace and security caused by terrorist acts. Before I come to what the minister said in his speech, I want you to know why and how India has been at the forefront of global counter-terrorism efforts. Now, India, as you may know, suffers from terrorism for many decades now. Hundreds of lives have been lost in attacks carried out by terrorists across the length and breadth of India. These terror groups are aided and abetted by some countries in India's neighborhood. Consider this, that much of the world woke up to the scourge of terrorism on 11 September 2001 when terrorists brought down the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. But India, as I said before, was a victim of terrorism long before 9/11 took place. In fact, in 1996, 5 years before 9/11, India took the initiative to pilot the draft Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, or CCIT, with the objective of providing a comprehensive legal framework for combating terrorism. It's been 25 years since India mooted the convention, but it's not been adopted yet. Why? Well, let's just say that's another story. But I will say this, ignore what India says at our own peril. The world needs to come together and now to adopt this convention. Now, to come back to Minister Jaishankar's statement in the Unsc Open Debate, he proposed 8 points that could, in a way, be an action plan. 1. Summon political will to unhesitatingly combat terrorism. There must be no ifs and buts in this fight, nor should we allow terrorism to be justified or terrorists glorified. 2. No double standards. Terrorists are terrorists. There are no good or bad terrorists. 3. Reform of the working of the UN committees dealing with sanctions and counter-terrorism. Transparency, accountability and effectiveness are needed. The practice of placing blocks and holds on listing requests without any rhyme or reason must end, because it only erodes the UN members' collective credibility. 4. Discourage exclusivist thinking or radicalization that divides the world. 5. Enlisting and delisting individuals and entities under the UN sanctions regimes objectively, not for political or religious considerations. 6. recognize linkages between terrorism and transnational organized crime. 7. Combating terrorist financing will only be as effective as the weakest jurisdiction. The Financial Action Task Force, also known as FATF, should continue to identify and remedy weaknesses in anti-money laundering. And 8. Pay attention to adequate funding to UN counter-terrorism bodies.
Resolution 1373, adopted in the wake of the 9/11 terror attacks, reminds us that terrorism continues to be the gravest threat to mankind. It not only grievously impacts human life, but attacks the very foundation of humanity. By adopting this resolution, the Council conveyed its unequivocal determination to address the menace of terrorism.
Now, that was the Indian Foreign Minister addressing a UN meeting on combating terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. Now, India would be chairing 3 key subsidiary bodies of the UNSC: the Counter-Terrorism Committee for the year 2022, the Libya Sanctions Committee, and the Taliban Sanctions Committee.
The Taliban Sanctions Committee, also called the 1988 Sanctions Committee, has always been a high priority for India, keeping in mind our strong interest and commitment to peace, security, development, and progress of Afghanistan. Our chairing this committee at this juncture will help keep the focus on the presence of terrorists and their sponsors threatening the peace process in Afghanistan. It has been our view that peace process and violence cannot go hand in hand.
Right, time for one more short break, but before that, here's a quiz for you. What was the major conflict that took place during India's first presidency of the UN Security Council in the year 1950? I'll give you a hint. It was somewhere in Asia. Keep watching DD India. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching the January 2021 edition of India in UNSC, a special broadcast here on DD India. Now, before we went into the break, I'd asked you, what was the major conflict that took place during India's first presidency of the UNSC in 1950? And the correct answer is the Korean War, which began in June 1950 during India's first presidency of the UNSC. Congratulations if you got it right. Better luck next time if you did not know the answer. There's one last quiz coming your way on the show, so as always, stay tuned. Now, Yemen came up for discussion in the UNSC on 14th January. For the benefit of viewers who might not be familiar with what happened in Yemen, 11th February marked 10 years since the fall of Yemen's longtime ruler Ali Abdullah Saleh in the wake of an Arab Spring uprising. People of Yemen had hoped for greater freedoms, but instead a war followed. The Houthis, backed by Iran, seized the capital Sana'a along with much of the country's north in late 2014 and ousted the government of Saleh's successor, President Abd Rabu Mansour Hadi. Houthis are so called because the founder of the Houthi movement, a Shia Islamist political and armed group, is from the Houthi tribe. By the way, the Houthi movement is officially called Ansar Allah. Now, subsequently, Saudi Arabia assembled a coalition that waged a military campaign against Yemen. The ensuing war killed some 130,000 people and destroyed Yemen's already weak infrastructure from roads and hospitals to water and electricity. UN agencies warned that the hunger crisis caused by the war could turn into full-fledged famine. Now, in the 14th January meeting on Yemen, Indian ambassador to the UN, T.S. Tirumurthy, expressed concern about millions of Yemenis facing severe food insecurity.
India commends the valiant efforts of all humanitarian workers to ensure the delivery of humanitarian assistance to Yemeni people in need, despite the daunting challenges they face. We also witnessed recently significant achievements in the pursuit of peace in Yemen, the formation of the new cabinet and the security redeployments in southern Yemen, as envisaged under the Riyadh Agreement. India welcomes these positive steps, which has triggered a wave of hope. We appreciate the role played by Saudi Arabia and others in facilitating these developments. We also commend the new government's role to continue its efforts towards achieving peace and stability in Yemen despite the recent attacks. India will continue to provide medical and other assistance to those afflicted by the conflict. It is time we put the people of Yemen at the center of our efforts in the midst of all other developments.
The ambassador said India favors a sustainable, comprehensive political settlement based on a Yemen-led and Yemen-owned political process. He also spoke about India's centuries-old ties with Yemen. Take a listen.
In the past, Indian freedom fighters visited Aden to support Yemen's independence. Today, Yemeni students come to India to study. There are nearly 300,000 Indians of Yemeni origin living in India and 200,000 Indian origin diaspora in Yemen. A large number of Indians were working in Yemen till 2015 when we were forced to evacuate them. This strong connect with Yemen makes the instability, violence and suffering in Yemen painful for India and all Indians.
India took part in a briefing and consultations on the Central African Republic on 21st January. The multi-dimensional integrated stabilization mission in the Central African Republic, known by its acronym MINUSCA, is a UN peacekeeping mission which started in April 2014. New Delhi says that the immediate and pressing priority is early restoration of peace and stability in that country.
We call on all opposition groups, particularly signatories to the peace agreement, to cease hostilities immediately and join CAR authorities in finding a peaceful solution to the current crisis. It is imperative for all stakeholders to respect the final verdict by the Constitutional Court and settle their disputes through a peaceful process.
The same day, that's 21st January, saw India share its views on the situation in Colombia. The Indian ambassador said India, as a long-standing partner, remains willing to support Colombia in its journey towards peace, progress and prosperity as the South American country marches ahead as one of the major economies in Latin America. He appreciated the remarkable progress in peace-building process. India lauded the efforts of the people and government of Colombia in realizing the achievements of the last 4 years.
India supports the Secretary General's 5 priorities as proposed for 2021, focusing on the UN mission's verification of sections concerning reintegration and security guarantees of the peace agreement. We welcome Colombia's request to expand the mandate of the UN verification mission to include the monitoring of sentences to be handed out by the Special Jurisdiction for Peace.
Talking about Colombia, did you know in 2018, India's space agency, the Indian Space Research Organization, also known as ISRO, successfully launched the FACSat-1 satellite, the Colombian Air Force's first ever nano satellite. Now, 26 January saw the UNSC organize an open debate on the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. Now, just so you know, India calls the Middle East West Asia. India welcomed the announcement of convening legislative, presidential and national council elections in Palestine. The Indian envoy said the normalization of relations between Israel and some member states of the League of Arab States is an important development which has the potential to promote regional cooperation for peace, prosperity and security. He said, India has always called for a just and comprehensive solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict and has welcomed all peaceful efforts to achieve the two-state solution through direct negotiations between the two parties. Ambassador Tirumurthy also welcomed President Mahmoud Abbas's call to hold an international peace conference with the participation of all relevant parties to achieve the vision of a sovereign and independent Palestine living side by side in peace and security with Israel. India welcomed the signing of the Al-Ula Declaration, which has ushered in rapprochement and reconciliation among the GCC countries as well. And India reaffirmed its commitment for a just solution to the Palestinian issue. Now, while on the subject of Palestine, it might be useful for you, the viewer, to know that India has made a multi-year enhanced annual financial contribution of $5 million to help the UN Relief and Works Agency provide humanitarian assistance and essential services. India has undertaken projects worth $72 million in Palestine. It gives 250 scholarships annually, and India also supplied COVID-19 medicines to Palestine. Libya also figured in the discussions in the UNSC. The briefing was specifically on the UN support mission in Libya. Now, Libya is at a critical juncture both in terms of political process and military conflict. A ceasefire agreement was signed between the Libyan parties at Geneva in October last year. The Libyan Political Dialogue Forum has also made notable progress.
India was a member of the Security Council when the resolutions 1970 and 1973 on Libya was adopted in 2011. We had then conveyed our reservations on the way these two resolutions were rushed in the Council. India had called for a calibrated and gradual approach and stressed on the importance of political efforts to address the situation. 10 years down, enduring peace still remains a dream in Libya, and the Libyan people continue to bear the brunt of actions taken by this council and the international community. While the political process and the conduct of elections is the immediate goal for us, it is important to further note that sustainable peace and stability requires national reconciliation. We should not lose sight of this larger goal in our desire to get a quick fix solution to the crisis. The international community must be prepared to provide assistance which Libya may ask for in this process.
Just to bring you up to date on the latest on Libya, on 5th February, Libya's rival political groups agreed to form an interim government after 5 days of talks in Switzerland. Mohamed Younes Menfi was elected to head the Presidency Council of an interim government and Abdul Hamid Bebe as its Prime Minister. Libya goes to the polls in December 2021. Now, here's what you need to know about India-Libya relations. India's relations with Libya have always been close and mutually beneficial. Indian companies and Indian expatriates have had a large presence in Libya in the past. The number of Indian expats in Libya in the 80s was nearly 100,000. Indian public sector and private companies have contributed significantly to critical infrastructure projects such as roads and highways, power plants and transmission lines in Libya. The presence of Indian professionals in the critical oil sector, both upstream and downstream, steel manufacturing, as well as in the education and health sectors, helped the Libyan society and economy tide over the difficulties of international isolation in the past. And the steel plant, power stations, transmission lines and oil pipelines built by Indian companies are positively contributing to the Libyan economy to this day. Right, time for a break, but before that, let's play question time one last time on the show. What was the subject of the first ever UNSC resolution that was co-drafted by India? I'll give you a hint. The country in question is an island. Keep watching DD India. Don't go anywhere.
The changing world of news. Headlines that you wake up to. News that shapes your day. Stories that matter to you. The latest and most accurate updates. A fresh start to a new day. The Breakfast News, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching the January 2021 edition of India in UNSC, a special broadcast here on DD India. Before we went into the break, I'd asked you what was the subject of the first ever UNSC resolution that was co-drafted by India. The correct answer is extension of mandate of the UN peacekeeping force in Cyprus. Now, Cyprus is an island nation in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Right, moving on, the UNSC held a briefing and consultation of the UN multi-dimensional integrated stabilization mission in Mali, also known as MINUSMA. Its mandate is implementation of the Accord for Peace and Reconciliation in Mali by the Malian parties and by other Malian actors concerned. Its mandate also includes the role and responsibilities of the Malian authorities regarding protection of civilians. Mali has been in turmoil since 2012 when an uprising prompted mutinous soldiers to overthrow the president. The power vacuum that resulted ultimately led to an Islamic insurgency and a France-led war that ousted the jihadists from power in 2013. But insurgents remain active and extremist groups affiliated to terror outfits such as Al-Qaeda and Islamic State have moved from the arid north to more populated central Mali since 2015, stoking animosity and violence between ethnic groups in the region. The country has also been plagued by a series of coups, the latest in August 2020 that ousted President Ibrahim Boubacar. More than 12,500 UN peacekeepers and nearly 1,700 international police work in Mali. Now, India supports the MINUSMA. India has indicated that it would positively consider UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' proposal to deploy air assets in MINUSMA.
We welcome the setting up of a transitional support group by the AU and a follow-up committee by ECOWAS, and hope that there will be positive progress in the coming months. Re-establishing state presence and state authority is fundamental to achieving peace and stability in Mali. The international community should support Mali in its efforts towards effective restoration of state institutions, civil administration and judicial entities.
The COVID-19 pandemic was another issue that attracted the attention of the UNSC. India said the efforts for combating COVID-19 should transcend conflict lines. A human-centric approach was the need of the hour.
At the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, India responded to the Secretary General's call and upgraded the medical facilities of UN peacekeeping missions in Goma, in DRC and Juba in South Sudan. India has also assisted more than 150 countries through urgent health and medical supplies. We have pledged $15 million for the Gavi and operationalized COVID-19 emergency fund for our neighbors with an initial contribution of $10 million. In the spirit of South-South cooperation, through the $150 million India-UN Development Partnership Fund, we have responded to member states' requests for urgent COVID-19 related assistance.
The Indian envoy spoke at the high-level peace-building replenishment conference. He announced India's pledge of $150,000 for peace building.
India has always played a constructive and significant role in the context of peace building through its extensive development partnership with developing countries, particularly in Africa and Asia. India has and continues to assist countries bilaterally in post-conflict situations by providing substantial grants and soft loans. Apart from focusing on infrastructure, especially housing, education and health, on connectivity, on providing livelihood to those impacted by conflict, especially in agriculture, and on projects at the grassroots level which directly impact the lives of people.
The UNSC also held discussions over the United Nations Office for West Africa and the Sahel. Take a look at this map of West Africa and the Sahel. It includes countries such as Cape Verde, Chad, Mauritania and Nigeria. Now, India called for an integrated approach for resolving problems faced by this region.
I would like to emphasize the need to ensure an integrated approach towards the region, because many of their problems are regional in nature, thus requiring an integrated and multi-country approach. For example, the problem of drying up of Lake Chad, which adjourns 4 different adjoins 4 different countries, Chad, Niger, Nigeria, and Cameroon, has caused grave socio-economic problems and also spurred radicalization and terrorism. We therefore need closer coordination and counter-terrorism cooperation in the region and its periphery to counter the growth of terrorist entities effectively. The coordinating role of UNOWAS, its support to national governments, and its partnership with G5 Sahel and ECOWAS will be critical.
India also took part in the Area Formula meeting organized by Estonia on the issue of media freedom in Belarus. Now, the Area Formula is named after Diego Aria, a Venezuelan politician and diplomat who served as Venezuela's envoy to the UN and president of the Security Council in the early 1990s. The story goes something like this. It's very interesting. In March 1992, when Aria held the rotating presidency of the UNSC, a Croatian priest contacted him. The priest wanted to give an eyewitness account of violence in Bosnia and Herzegovina to the UNSC members, but Aria could not convene a formal meeting. So he invited the then UNSC members to meet the priest in the UN Delegates Lounge. Now, this out-of-the-box format has since come to be known as the Aria Formula. It can be convened by UNSC member to enable the Council to have an informal dialogue with a person or persons invited to the meeting. Now, India made the following points. 1. Free and independent media is critical. 2. Disinformation campaigns are a significant threat to media freedom. And 3. Technology companies need to ensure transparency and prevent misinformation.
In the words of Mahatma Gandhi, who himself was a prolific journalist and editor, the sole aim of journalism should be service, and freedom of the press is a precious privilege that no country can forego. As the world's largest democracy with the most diverse and vibrant media, India therefore welcomes any discussion on protecting and promoting the freedom of the media.
India took part in another meeting held under the Area Formula, called by Russia this time, to discuss about children and armed conflict. India said the Convention on the Rights of the Child, international humanitarian law and relevant national laws should constitute the basis for repatriation and reintegration of children of foreign terrorist fighters. Take a look at this short presentation. Here's a quick roundup of some more activities from the month of January. My colleague Deepika Metho has the details.
Well, thank you so much, Ramesh, for that. And now let's take a look at some more developments that took place in the month of January 2021. On 25th January, Germany spoke on behalf of the G4, which includes India, Japan and Brazil, in the intergovernmental negotiations on Security Council reform. The G4 said, as I quote, "The G4 believes if there isn't a discussion of a single document before the 4th meeting of the IGN this year and the application of GA rules of procedure, the IGN will have run its course and then the debate will have to shift back to the General Assembly in a formal process. We now know that there is a strong support for this in the room. Strong support for making the headway. It is a firm belief that in order to instill new life in the debate, we need to start a proper conversation and negotiation based on a single text with GA rules on procedure." Unquote. India acknowledged the role played by the UN Regional Center for Preventive Diplomacy for Central Asia. The agency is based at Ashgabat, the capital of Turkmenistan. India also acknowledged the role played by the center in supporting Central Asian countries and Afghanistan. The center was established in 2007 at the initiative of the 5 Central Asian states: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. India has deep-rooted historical ties with Central Asia. India has provided a line of credit worth $1 billion for development projects in Central Asia. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres lauded India's efforts to assist different nations in fighting against the COVID-19 pandemic by supplying the vaccines. He said India's vaccine production capacity was one of the best assets in the world today. The Security Council extended the mandate of the United Nations Peacekeeping Force in Cyprus for a further period ending on 31st July 2021. It supported the UN Secretary General's decision to convene an informal 5+ United Nations meeting between the leaders of the 2 Cypriot communities and the guarantor powers, Greece, Turkey and the United Kingdom, at the earliest opportunity. India has also been appointed as the global theme champion for energy transition track. Ambassador Tirumurthy attended an informal meeting held to discuss high-level dialogue on energy and Sustainable Development Goal 7. The SDG 7 is one of 17 Sustainable Development Goals established by the United Nations General Assembly in 2015. It aims to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy for all. And finally, India joined the 2021 honor roll list of UN member states that paid their UN budget assessments in full. India made the payment of $24.12 million on 29th of January. Well, that's all with the updates. Over to you, Ramesh.
Thank you, Deepika. That was my colleague Deepika Mehto filling us in on what else happened in January 2021 in the UNSC. And with that, it's a wrap. But news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Namaste land.
Marhaban ila al-Hind.
Zari India.
Salam India.
Namaste India.
Namaskar Bharata.
Mui
India.
Nahnu Hunud.
India.
Ma Hindi Hasti.
Mung Hindian.
Salam Hindustan.
We are India.
As India returns to the UN Security Council after 10 years, we get you the inside track on all that takes place around the famed horseshoe table. From India's stand on climate change and conflict resolution to its push for reform multilateralism in a post-COVID world. For a comprehensive coverage of the Security Council's activities, complete with news, views and analysis, watch India in UNSC every month on DD India. Catch the January 2021 edition of India in UNSC at these times only on DD India. As India returns to the UN Security Council after 10 years, we get you the inside track on all that takes place around the famed horseshoe table. From India's stand on climate change and conflict resolution to its push for reform multilateralism in a post-COVID world. For a comprehensive coverage of the Security Council's activities, complete with news, views and analysis, Watch India in UNSC every month on DD India. Catch the January 2021 edition of India in UNSC at these times only on DD India.